I'm Jackie Miller, and I just want to share a little bit about my story with you. God called me into ministry when I was like 21 or 22 years old, but I refused to accept the calling because I wanted to do things my way. My pastor at that time came to me and he said to me, "When are you going to accept the calling that God has on your life?" Me being such a rebellious young adult, I looked at him and I smiled and then I walked off. And then he came to me again years later and he asked me the same question again. I smiled and I walked off. I've always been in leadership. Besides in the home, in the church, in my community, I was always a leader. So I knew that God was calling me to ministry. But sometimes we get caught up in what we think our life should be instead of what God desires. I've been married multiple times. And because of the things I had encountered at the hands of my father, I found myself going from one relationship to another relationship, one marriage into another marriage, looking for love, that love that I didn't get from my biological father. But unfortunately, all of the things that I had encountered was hindering me from being in a healthy relationship. I saw my dad physically and verbally abuse my mother. So I made up in my mind I would never allow anyone to treat me the way that I saw my dad treat my mom. But doing that, as I began to experience different relationships or as I entered into marriage, I took that baggage into the relationship, which eventually ended up in divorce. And I found myself also transferring that baggage onto my children because the decisions that I was making was very selfish decisions. I didn't think about how they would be affected if I brought someone else into the home or if I married someone else. But it affected them tremendously. It affected them mentally and it also affected them emotionally. So in my last marriage, because I was still so broken and I had not dealt with the emotional abuse that I had experienced, I found myself struggling to make that marriage work. And eventually it ended up ending. And at that time when I was just going through all of that with my marriage, one of my children became extremely sick to the point of almost death. And then I had another one of my children who was acting out. They didn't know how to deal with the things that they were going through in their relationships. And I didn't know how to help them because I was broken myself. And so I began to question God, asking, "Lord, what is it that I can do? I don't know what to do. I don't know how to help myself. I don't know how to help my children. I'm broken. They're broken." And I just began to cry out to the Lord. So one day, I went to seek prayer from the intercessory prayer team at my church. And one of the prayer team members asked, or the young lady asked, "What is it that you have need for prayer?" Or "What is your need for prayer?" And as I began to explain, I said, "I know God is calling me to greater. And I know that God is calling me into ministry. But because of all of the other things that's going on in my life, I don't know which way to go, or I don't know what I need to do." And so she began to just ask me questions about my childhood and things that I had experienced. And as she began to probe further, she asked if there was something that I was dealing with and I didn't know how to forgive individuals that had hurt me in the past. And as she began to question me, I began to cry because I knew that there were some things that I had hidden, that I had suppressed, and I didn't want anyone to know about it because it would hurt too many people and it would also hurt me to actually face that. So when I did come out and explain to her that yes, I had experienced some things that I didn't forgive those who had hurt me, and I just began to cry out, and she prayed for me, and I just cried and I cried, and I was just crying profusely because I knew it was time to face that demon, that I needed deliverance and I needed to be set free. So after we prayed, and then I said, Lord, I've tried everything else. I've went looking for love in all of the wrong places. Now I must surrender to you and surrender to your will for my life. And at that time I began to say, Lord, I accept the call to ministry. And so I went away on a 3-day sabbatical to this place called the Sanctuary in Wisconsin. And as I was down on my knees praying out to the Lord, God began to reveal some things to me, some things that were inside of me, the hidden parts. He started to show me things, and I mean, they were coming across my face just as clear as day. He began to show me that I had a spirit of pride. And I never knew that I had a spirit of pride. I thought it was just that I was confident and that I was very assertive and I knew who it was that I was. And he also began to show me that I had a judgmental spirit. And I was just like, Lord, judging or judgmental? I couldn't believe that. But then he began to show me how I was judging other people. And I thought that I was just surrounding myself with like-minded individuals or people that had a heart for him. But I thought about it further and I said, yeah, when people don't do the things that I say, or if they're not living the way that I think that they're living, yeah, I was judging them. And I would tell them that you're going to go to hell or that God is not pleased. But who was I to judge someone else's life when I had so many other things that was going on in my own life? And then he began to show me that I had an unforgiving spirit. And all of the things that I had encountered and all of the hurt that I had experienced, I had to forgive those people that had caused me the pain. And I just began to continue to cry out to God. And I said, God, I'm so sorry. And he said to me, you didn't trust me like I told you to. I told you to trust in me with all of your heart. And I didn't do that. But as I began to cry out and repent and say, God, I'm so sorry. Please forgive me for all of those things that I've done. And then when I got up, I said, Lord, now I'm ready to surrender to your will. What's your will for my life? I remember my pastor asking me when was I going to accept the call. And then there was another prophet that came to me and asked, when are you going to stop running from God? And then there was another prophet that came and said, when are you going to stop running from God? He has something for you to do. And so one Friday night, one of my friends called me. And this is funny. I mean, this is really funny. And she was a friend of mine that I had always tried to get to go to church with me. But she wasn't into the church. But she called me and she asked me to attend a prayer service that her sister-in-law was having at her church. And I was just like blown away. I mean, I was just in shock because I knew this wasn't her. So what I did is I said, God, I need you to show me one more sign. One more sign, please, if that's what you desire for me to do. And I went to the prayer service. And I mean, it was amazing. Lives were being changed. People were being delivered and set free. And I just prayed and I continued to cry out to God. And at the end of the service, the pastor got up to give the benediction and the final remarks. And he called me out. And I couldn't believe that he was calling me out. And he said, woman of God, there is something that God has told me to tell you. And I was like, God, I don't believe this. And he said, I don't want to be out of order because I know you probably have your own covering. But I gotta tell you what God has told me to tell you. He said, God has a calling on your life. And he says that the time is now for you to accept that call. He said lives are going to be changed because of you. People are going to want to know, what is it about you? He is going to place you before many people. And they are going to want to know, why is it that you're so different? He says you're going to lay hands on the sick and they shall recover. Oh my God. I just cry. And I cry. And whenever I tell this story, I get so emotional because I know that it has to be God. When he gave me that word, I knew it was God. And after the service, I went up to the pastor and I said, I prayed before I got here. And I prayed and I said, God, one more sign is all that I ask that you give me. And then I know that the call that you have on my life is what I must do. And I will surrender to the ultimate purpose that you have for me. And I said, I left that place. I was just no good. And I was just crying out. I went home. I continued to cry out and cry out and cry out to the Lord. So I say this to you. When God has a calling, you can't run. And I'm reminded of the story of Jonah. God had given Jonah an assignment. He wanted Jonah to go to Nineveh to preach to those who were dying in their sins. But Jonah didn't want to go. Jonah did not want to go. So he decided to do things his way. And he tried to go another route. And then God had a great fish to swallow up Jonah. And Jonah was in the belly of the fish for 3 days and 3 nights until he had to surrender and tell the Lord that he was sorry. That's my life, because it took me 40 years of going around in circles, knowing that God had a calling on my life until I had to surrender. And I was also like Moses. I said, God, I don't know what to say. God, I don't know what to do. I'm not eloquent in my speech. But God says, if you open up your mouth and you surrender your heart to me, I will tell you what to say and what to do. And if God has a calling on your life, he will equip you and he will qualify you. But it's time that you stop running and that you begin fulfilling the purpose that he has for you. I said, Lord, I surrender. And it's time that you surrender your heart to God. And you'll be surprised how he will use you for his glory. And I am so thankful that he was patient with me in spite of all of my brokenness and my filthiness and my bitterness. He decided, I can still use you. I can use you as a mouthpiece to those women who are broken, who have been sexually violated, who have been abused, physically and verbally, mentally and emotionally abused, and they still suffer. I can use you. And I say to you today, allow God to use you for his glory. Allow your testimony to cause someone else to overcome their struggle and their challenges. And you will be surprised at how much your life will change for the good when you allow God to be glorified in all that you do. Be blessed.